We are going to be making Palladio's Villa Rotonda, and it's a great opportunity for us to learn how to use a lot of the tool sets. If we scroll in and scroll out with our track wheel on our mouse, we can zoom in and zoom out, so that's how I'm moving around. What I'd like to do is take a look and figure out what we want to pull off in this modeling exercise. I don't need to model each and every single thing that I see because I have so much duplication in my model. So when we are going to embark on a new modeling project, let's get an overall game plan of what we want to do. So first thing to do is, if we're going to model an existing building, let's do some research. Let's Google it. Let's take a look at other resources, other books that we can find to find pictures of our model, floor plans, if we can, other photographs, and we can use these as references. Anytime you're going to start a project, do a little bit of research first. When I look at this footprint, and then in the photograph of Villa Rotonda, I can see a lot of duplication. I see some basic shapes. I see a big square. I see a big circle. And I see these little porches that are sticking off to the sides. Now, if you are an architecture student and all of these have special names, fantastic. You can use those special names in your own documentation. If I need to say that this is an Ionic capital, I can say so. But for what we're saying, we're going to avoid most of the, I would say, discipline-based jargon and terminology, and we're just going to use our SketchUp tools to the best of our abilities to make some shapes. So, as I mentioned, we have this big square, kind of the main bulk of our building. We have 4 porches that stick off. Each one of these porches, to our eye, to the floor plan, and to the photograph, are all the same. So we have some duplication there. We have windows, and we're going to operate under the assumption that this window, that looks pretty close to this window, are going to be duplicates of each other. We have square windows up at the top. For our purposes, we're going to assume that those are all exactly the same. Our porches, we're going to assume that those porches are all the same. This archway under here, we're going to assume it's the same as this archway under here. So we're going to make some assumptions that will save us some time in the end. We also have this cylinder. We can just see the top of this little cylinder sticking up on the top. We can see that in our illustration here. And then we also have this dome at the top. So we're going to basically bust this into basic shapes to kind of get a sense of the look and feel of this building. And we're going to do that with our polygon tools. It's going to be our rectangle tool and our circle tool. These two guys are the only ones that we're going to use at this stage, other than perhaps our line tool. So what I want to do is I want to circle around. So I know that I can zoom in and zoom out with my mouse tool. If I go ahead and I hold down on the track wheel of my mouse, you can see that my cursor turns into an orbit tool. And if I hold that down, that gives me an opportunity to pivot and look around, which is nice. So I'm just going to rotate my view to the point where I actually have this image flat on the ground. Oh, I told you I was going to show you how to put that in there. Let me do that now. I'll get rid of it. We can import a lot of different references into SketchUp. Now you see I have an image here. I'll delete that too. I can pull in images. I can pull in other models. And to do that, I'm going to go to File, Import. And I have my reference images that I've already collected ahead of time. One of those is going to be my floor plan. Now I can pull it in as an image, I can pull it in as a texture, or I can pull it in as a matched photo. For us, we're going to pull this in as an image. And when we say image, you can consider that we're going to go ahead and pull this in as though it's a poster that would be hanging on a wall. As opposed to if we pulled it in as a texture, we might have a photograph of a brick. We might want to tile that brick all over the whole building. But right now we just want to pull this in as an image. If I hit import, I can put this near the origin, just kind of flex it out there. And now I have something that I can trace. And there's nothing wrong with starting off by tracing. So let's go ahead and use our rectangle tool. The rectangle tool, I use it over here off to the side. We click one corner, we pull off to the side, we click again, and that drops the next corner. And you can see that this little rectangle now has filled in with a color. A couple of the things that are happening when we make this rectangle is if I click on one dot and I pull it down, you can see that every so often I'll have this diagonal dotted line. And that tells me the proportions of the rectangle that I'm making are close to established proportions, and SketchUp is really, really good at guessing what you might want to draw. So if I pull this down to something that's squarish, SketchUp is going to assume that I might want to draw a square. Now, as soon as I get away from those proportions, it goes away. But once it's there, it says square, I can hold down on my shift key, and I'm using the left shift because I don't think I've ever used the right hand shift and the right hand control in my life. I'm going to use the left shift, and I can lock onto those proportions. So now no matter where I put my mouse, I've told SketchUp I definitely want to make it a square. I'm going to let go of shift, and you can see now I can modify my proportions all I want. So for me, I'm going to come on over here. I'm going to click on one corner. I'm going to click on another corner, and I can see it's suggesting to me that I'm drawing a square. I love it, so I'm going to click again, and now I have my square in the middle of the floor plan. Now, one of the things that's happened is I've covered up some of my line drawing that I was hoping I could trace, and we'll deal with that in just a second. Now, the circle tool is the next thing that we're going to want to use. If I click on my circle tool, rather than clicking on one corner and then another corner, putting a circle somewhere in the middle, the circle tool wants me to click a point. I'll do it over here so we can see a little better. We want to click a centralized point, and then we're pulling a radius. So rather than doing one corner and then the outside corner, we're not clicking here and then here to make a circle. We're clicking the dead middle of our circle and then pulling a radius to get the overall diameter of the circle that we'd like. So with those two tools, I'm going to make the main body of this area. So I've got the floor plan up here at the top, and I know that this is the centralized drum that I saw that used to be hidden over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click roughly in the middle of the side of this drum. And now I will go ahead and pull a radius, and I have a square, and I have this circle. Right now I'm going to go ahead and see what I can do to modify these so that it's more of a mass instead of just a two-dimensional shape. So I'm going to get rid of these guys that we don't need. And to do that, I can do a couple of things. I can triple click, 1, 2, 3, and that'll select everything. And I can hit the delete key on my keyboard. Now, I can click once, and if I click once, I collect the overall plane. If I double click, I get the plane and the perimeter that surround it. But if I triple click, I know that I get everything. And that's going to be important when we come up to a three-dimensional mass, and I'll show you that in a second. In order to take these two-dimensional profiles and turn them into three-dimensional volumes, I need to go down a little bit further in my getting started tools, my large tool set. I'm going to use this guy here, the push and pull tool. Now, while I work, in my head, I think of this as an extrusion. So I may call this the extrude tool. I may call it the push and pull tool. But whatever I call it, when I click on it, you'll see that icon reflected in my tooltip. So if I want to extrude this, I can click on it once, and then I can pull it up to a height that I want to let it go at, and then I'd click again and I'd let it go. And this brings us to that triple click that I mentioned earlier. If I want to get rid of this whole cylinder that I've now made, if I click once, I get that overall plane. If I double click, I get the plane and the perimeter, and now you can see how I'm missing part of this cylinder. But by triple clicking on the cylinder, my selection floods everything that's geometrically touching where I started. So now I can grab that whole thing and hit the delete key. So as we're deleting things, triple clicking will almost guarantee that we're getting everything that we want. The one other way that I can go ahead and select things for deletion is to use the selection area. And this is very intuitive. If we just click and drag from the left to the right, we can grab everything that's inside of that marquee. If we grab from the right to the left, we'll select a couple of different things, and I'll show you what happens here. Let's make a couple of circles. If I have one guy down there, if I grab everything from the left to the right. Now before I let go, you can see that there are 3 circles that aren't totally inside of my selection and 2 that are. And when I let go, you'll notice I selected only the things that were completely inside of my marquee. So from the left to the right, I'm grabbing only the things that are completely within my marquee. If I grab from the right to the left, I'll grab everything that my marquee touches. So when I let go, we should see those 3 circles selected as well, and now all 5 of my circles are selected. Now, just threw a lot at you. For me, when I'm modeling, I'll use my left to right marquee, and I'll use a triple click. That's how I operate. You might operate differently, and that's fine. We're going to go ahead and pull this square up, and we're going to go ahead and pull this circle up to a cylinder. So these are the basic shapes of this building. Now I know that I also have these porches. So each side of my model has a porch. I'll just go ahead and put some porches in, just so that visually I can kind of get a sense of what this building is going to look like. Now, on that first porch that I drew, I pulled it up to a certain height, which is great. But I want to make sure that I pull the rest of these porches up to the exact same height. And to do that, I'll still use my push and pull tool. I almost called it the extrude tool. And I can click it. Now, as I pull it up, I told you earlier that when SketchUp looks at how we're modeling, it tries to make guesses. And the push and pull tool is the same. We can try to give SketchUp a clue as to how high we might want to go with this push and pull tool. And we do that by floating over something we've already extruded. So you can see I can pull this up to the top of my larger rectangle. I can also go down and reference perhaps the midpoint of that line. But what I want to do is I want to reference the place I was just at. So I want to extrude so that it's even with this height. Once I do that, I can click. And that's one way that the push and pull tool works. The other way is that it stores inside of its memory how far it push and pulled the last time it was utilized. And I can show you that by if I go onto one of these that I haven't push and pulled yet, and I just double click, it will go ahead and reload the distance that it did the last time. So just by double clicking, I know that these are all going to be the same height as the one before. So this is the main massing of the building that we're going to work on. So we know that we've got 4 porches, we've got a big chunk in the middle, oh, and we have that cylinder in the middle. So let's talk about how we can make that cylinder in the middle right now. And then we'll go ahead and take a break. I am going to want to see through this cube a little bit, or at least hide this cube. Now I can look underneath and I can see through that image, and that might work for me. But what I want to do is I want to have these shapes as things I can move around and manipulate without breaking everything. And you'll get a sense of what I mean in a moment. So I actually want to group these as different things. So instead of taking this just geometry and shifting it around, I want to be able to grab that whole porch at one time, or grab the whole chunk in the middle at one time. So I'll use my triple click, 1, 2, 3. Now, there are a few things that we see we can see all of our tools on the left. A couple things we can't see, and those are in a right-click menu. So now that I have this guy triple clicked, I'm going to right-click, and I can see a couple of options here. One says make a group, one says make a component. I see one that says hide, and a bunch of other stuff that we'll deal with later. But right now, I'm going to make that a group. 1, 2, 3, right-click, make it a group. 1, 2, 3, right-click, make it a group. 1, 2, 3, right-click, make it a group. And 1, 2, 3, right-click, make it a group. And we'll have a better way to do this in a second. Now, what I can do is I can click on this square, or cube, really, or rectilinear prism. I don't want to go so far as to say solid cube. People that are watching this that are from the mathematics discipline might take umbrage with that. Let's right-click and say hide. So here is the location of that centralized drum. So let's go ahead and find a place that's roughly in the middle, right about there. And let's go ahead and pull a radius. Looking good. Now let's go ahead and pull this. Let's actually pull it way too high. That's fine. 1, 2, 3, right click and make it a group. Now I want to bring this cube back, so I'll go to Edit, Unhide. And I can say All if I've hidden many things, or I can just say Unhide Last. So that brings my cube back, which is good. Now let's go ahead and pull in this image that we had originally. So let's practice doing that again. We'll go to File, Import, and this image of the actual building itself, once again, is an image, and I'll hit Import. And I'm saving these when I downloaded them onto my desktop as JPEGs. So let's pull this in. So we can see we have our porches, great. We have the main chunk, great. And we have the main part of this drum, this cylinder that goes out the middle, this tower, whatever you would like to call it. Now, I have it way too high here. I can see that in my photograph, and I can also see it in this older elevation. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I click on this, and I'm going to scale it down. I want to bring it down. Now, I can right-click, and I can say Edit Group. Now, when I say Edit Group, you can see everything else kind of grayed out, which means I don't have the option to push and pull anything because I'm only working on my group, which is good for me because I just want to take this and pull it down a little bit lower. Now that's probably the height of my tower, and then we'll just deal with the dome. Right now, the way I want to deal with this dome is something we're going to deal with maybe in about 3 or 4 different sessions. So let's put a pin in that and deal with that in a moment. And let's go ahead and take this concept that we're working on, and we're going to add another little hook to it, and we're going to move forward and getting all of these proportions really locked in. So we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back to that.